Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, what can stop the UK's xenophobic riots? It started after the deadly stabbing of 3 young girls. Now, fueled by false rumors online, Muslims and immigrants are fearing for their safety and their lives at the hands of far-right mobs. I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take.
In Liverpool, we got access to a community library. It was set on fire the night before by local youths. And when you walked in, it was really overwhelming. There was a smell of smoke everywhere. There were charred books. The place was entirely in ruins. My name is Milena Veselinovic, and I am a freelance correspondent for Al Jazeera.
Milena, welcome to The Take. It's good to have you here. So, it's been over a week since a knife attack that killed 3 young girls in the seaside city of Southport, just north of Liverpool. Since then, we've seen violence spread across the north of England and into Northern Ireland as well. Can you get us up to speed on what's happened and who has been targeted?
Well, this was all sparked by a really horrific mass stabbing here in Southport, where I am today. A dance class of little girls was attacked. 3 little girls lost their lives, and that really sparked a wave of misinformation initially about who this suspect was. The police said that, he was apprehended and he was a 17-year-old. And really quite quickly, false rumors started spreading online that he was a Muslim immigrant, and even a Muslim-sounding name started doing the rounds on messaging apps, on TikTok, on Telegram. The police then came out and said, look, this is a horrific tragedy. 2 girls were instantly killed. The third girl, a little girl, she died the day after. They were only 6, 7, and 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
They said, calm down, more or less. Not quite in those words, but this is a British-born suspect that we have arrested. But that did really nothing to quell these rising tensions. So in the early evening, groups of people, groups of men mainly, started gathering around a local mosque. Started chanting anti-immigration slogans, and it all descended into chaos very quickly. Started throwing things at the mosque. They were convinced that the suspect of this murder was a Muslim immigrant, and it was chaos. And 50 riot police were injured in that violence.
Far-right rioters in Southport were fueled by misinformation about the suspect. False rumours he was an asylum seeker proved definitively to be untrue after the suspect was charged with the murders and named as Axel Radicabana, born in Cardiff.
And in the days since, that sort of sentiment against this suspect being a Muslim, even though we now know that that's not the case, has really grown into a wider anti-immigrant sentiment. And we have just really seen the tension build and build and build, and there is really no sign of it stopping at this point.
Wow, Milena, so much to unpack there. I want to linger for a moment, though, on the stabbings of these 3 young girls, 6, 7, and 9, and they were at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. Is that right?
That's right. And I think in the wave of the violence that's really swept across the nation since that tragedy, those 3 little girls, there's what happened there. In some ways, that's been lost, the weight of that tragedy. It was a Taylor Swift-themed dance party. It was a class of about 25 children, and 11 children and 2 adults were stabbed. And speaking to people in Southport here, that their hometown where this happened, it's quite a small town. It's a tightly knit community. Nothing like this has ever happened here before.
It's just little girls going to a dance class. And then the way it's been distorted has just been disgusting for their memory. And I still can't really process that this has happened in our little seaside town.
It is just the pain and the grief of people here is just simply overwhelming, and they feel angry that the focus of the last few days hasn't really been on those young lives and those innocent little girls, but that it's been on the rioting and those really, really ugly scenes, and this pain and grief has been hijacked to serve a different kind of an agenda. And one of the mothers of one of the girls who's killed, she wrote on Facebook asking it to stop, really pleading for the violence to stop. She said, "This is the only thing I will write, but you need to stop this," something along the lines of the police and the emergency services being the heroes, and this is not what they want.
So it sounds like this town of Southport hasn't even really been allowed to grieve properly before these riots broke out. I know that you spoke to people who have been the targets of some of these attacks. You went to a mosque that got vandalized in Southport. What did people tell you?
Well, they spoke, quite obviously about the fear that they had in those moments, but they also spoke about their surprise. They said, this is not that kind of town. Nothing like this has happened here before. They said, that their families, their mums, their sisters, some of them wearing, headscarves, going around the town with no issues before. But then they said, in the wake of what happened, they're afraid to leave their homes. They don't want to go out. And they were terrified of something like that happening again. We spoke to a group of young guys who were inside the mosque as the whole thing unfolded, as it was being attacked. And they said they truly believed they were going to die.
Started throwing bricks, like petrol bombs. We had a fire just behind me. When that went off, we thought that the actual building was on fire. We just couldn't stop crying, thinking, is this our time coming to an end?
After the break, how years of anti-immigration rhetoric set the stage for the current unrest. So, Milena, let's talk about some of the people who have used the incident of this stabbing to stoke anti-immigrant sentiment in the streets, because this isn't the first time that far-right Islamophobic or anti-immigrant sentiment has been a big issue in the UK. I think a lot of our listeners will be familiar with Nigel Farage, the far-right member of parliament who has weighed in on this. Many have blamed him for his rhetoric around this situation.
We need to start getting tough. We need to use stop and search, regardless of the colour of the skin of anyone that gets stopped. We need tougher prison sentences for anybody carrying a knife.
But there's another character, someone known as Tommy Robinson, as well. Who is he, and what role has he played in all of this?
Well, first of all, I do have to say that Nigel Farage has distanced himself from all the violence. And he did post certain things online in the wake of the stabbings, questioning whether the police were telling the public the whole truth. And, he says he doesn't condone the violence or anything like that. So I think that's important to mention. But he is also saying things that are quite unusual for an elected member of parliament to say, such as questioning what the authorities are saying.
Mm-hmm.
Then when it comes to Tommy Robinson, he is his real name, Stephen Yaxley Lennon. He's a very well-known figure on the far right, former leader of the now defunct English Defence League. They have in the past staged quite violent disorder fueled by Islamophobia.
Every British person today is offended with people shouting Allah Akbar!
Now, he also has been posting a list of lots of these rallies, which he says are patriotic vigils. Some of them have descended into violence. He himself says again that he does not condone any violence, and that's not what he's trying to achieve. But he has been tweeting incessantly, really telling his supporters where they can congregate to express, their feelings. And he's doing that from abroad as well, actually, because we don't believe that he is in the UK at the moment. But he doesn't really need to be because, he's got something like 800,000 or more followers on Twitter, followers on other social media platforms. And that is basically how he's informing them where to congregate, what to do.
Wow. There's one tweet on X in which he writes that this was more evidence to suggest Islam is a mental health issue rather than a religion of peace, and that migrants or immigrants are replacing the British national with hostile, violent, aggressive people. Your children don't matter to the government. What do people make of not only this rhetoric, but what feels like meddling, especially if he's not in the country?
Well, look, he's always been known for inflammatory statements. And we've spoken to lots of people in this area who say there are some really genuine kind of grievances that some of these communities have in terms of cost of living, in terms of having difficulty finding housing because it's so expensive, in terms of, the National Health Service being overstretched and it being quite hard to get medical treatment or a general medical appointment. And then the far right being quite good at jumping on those grievances and saying, well, it's the immigrants' fault. It's because you've got too many immigrants in your area. That's why you can't get a doctor's appointment. An immigrant family has moved into your town. They've taken your house. So twisting some of those seriously, legitimate grievances that some of the communities here, especially in the north of England, have, and some of the disorder that's been happening in one of the more deprived areas of the country. And, since Brexit, immigration has been a really key kind of political issue here. One of the promises of the previous Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, the Conservative Prime Minister, was to stop the boats.
People need to know that if they come here illegally, that they will be detained and swiftly removed. And once they know that, they will stop coming and we'll be able to stop the boats.
And that is despite illegal immigration being quite a small percentage of overall legal migration. But one of the pledges of the Conservative government has been to decrease immigration. The current Labour government says that they too want to decrease immigration as well, overall. So, the chant "stop the boats," we've heard that now at some of these protests that have turned into riots. So it does feel that like some of that latent anti-immigrant feeling that has been stirred for whatever reason is now being emboldened to come out on the surface.
So, Milena, this week marks 1 month since a new government took charge in the UK and ushered in a lot of hope from voters who were ready to see the Labour Party. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has spoken out pretty strongly about these riots.
This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery, and it has no place on our streets or online.
And he's also said he's setting up a standing army of special police to deal with the violence. How confident are people that the government can actually get a handle on this, or do they expect violence to continue in the coming days?
Well, it's a really challenging situation. The interesting thing about Keir Starmer is that he was the director of public prosecutions during the 2011 London riots. And the way that he dealt with that, there were quite long prison sentences being handed out to people who were taking part, even peripherally, in these riots. And there's a sense now that he would like to use the same kind of strategy in dealing with this unrest. So courts have been allowed to sit longer hours. There have been more prosecutors drafted in. The problem this time round is that the prison system is overstretched We have very little space left in prisons. So it's a far more challenging situation than back in 2011. At this point, things are not calming down. There's disorder now pretty much every single day, and it's popping up in various different parts of the country. It's very unpredictable.
Hundreds of rioters vandalised homes and cars, which they attacked at random across Cleveland, leaving a trail of devastation.
There have been incidents in Manchester, Stoke, Nottingham and Belfast.
We don't have enough police officers, even for normal state of policing, let alone the kind of challenges they're facing right now. And in some cases, it's hard for the police to know which one to focus resources on. And then when one of them flares up, then, the local force has to ask for reinforcements from the neighboring forces. And by the time they get that, mayhem has already descended on that area, and it's kind of almost too late, like the control has been lost.
So from what you've described, what we've just talked about here, and also from the headlines, it feels like the UK is burning. But we have also seen signs of the opposite, people showing solidarity with those who feel targeted by these riots. For many people, I think the UK can seem like a beacon of multiculturalism, especially a place like London. Does that ring true for people after all of this violence? And is it true for places other than London?
Well, look, the situation in many places in the UK is really tense. It's bad, right? And we're seeing really bad things, but you could go to parts of England now and be completely unaffected by this.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, most of England is pretty it's like pockets in towns and things. London, you wouldn't even know about it. So I wouldn't say that England is burning in that sense. The UK is definitely a multicultural society. I mean, the fact that, we've had British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, a person of colour, he's had cabinet ministers as well who were also people of colour. I think that proves the UK is a multicultural society. Now, are there issues? Clearly, these riots show that there are pockets of the country where perhaps there isn't a lot of community cohesion and where communities do live quite far apart, which breeds misunderstanding. And I think the politicians here know that multiculturalism, in a way, sort of has to succeed because we are already such a diverse country. There is no going back. And look, wherever there's been a huge disorder or a riot, the morning after, the whole community, people of all ethnicities, would come together for a big cleanup. And you see people go out and say, this is not done in my name.
We will not stand for racism. We will not stand for Islamophobia. We will only stand for a beautiful multicultural society in which everybody is included. It is not in our name. Not in our name.
And the numbers of the people who are causing violence aren't that high, but they are able to have an outsized impact. But it's important to bear in mind that there are many, many, many more other people who come to the communities that have been hit and help the cleanup and want to reassure everyone that they will be safe. And that is quite heartening to see.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Ashish Malhotra, Sarid Khalili, and Sonia Bagat, with Doha Mosad, Veronique Ishaya, and me, Malika Bilal. It was edited by Noor Wazwaz. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Nate Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.